Hey everyone, I'm Luke.
And I'm Max.
And welcome back to the Upside Down Thoughts NASCAR podcast. And we're joined by Zach once again.
How's it going, everybody?
We're here for the Great American Getaway presented by VisitPA.com. Pocono 400. And we're going to kick it right off with qualifying. And we're actually at this track, so we got a lot of information for you guys today. So stay tuned for this podcast. So Max, you want to kick us off with qualifying?
Yeah, of course, getting right into qualifying. We have Denny Hamlin. He's the favorite going into this race, and he's right on the pole. No doubt. He beats Chris Buescher by just about a tenth for the pole, and it's awesome to see Chris Buescher on the pole. It's a great qualifying effort for him, as well as the drivers in third, fourth, and fifth, being Hocevar, Nemechek, and Cole Custer. Cole Custer, his first top five start of the season, so great work there from the Haas factory team.
Yeah, and then we move further down the list. Chase Briscoe, another great qualifying effort. A great position to set him up for a great run. And we got Tyler Reddick, who hasn't had great qualifying efforts this year. Finds himself in the top 10. And then Daniel Suarez with rounding out the top 10. Another great qualifying effort from him. Who just had a great previous race at Mexico City.
Yeah, moving along, we got Eric Jones in the 11th spot. Nice to see him up there. Logano, Priest, Keselowski, and Zane Smith. Priest, Keselowski, two RFK guys right back to each other, qualified in the top 15, which is nice to see.
And continuing further down the list, we got the RCR number 3, Austin Dillon, Noah Gragson 17th, Chase Elliott 18th, who I will elaborate on his qualifying effort in a little bit, how when we get to the person in the back that kind of might have screwed up his lap possibly. I'll get to that in a little bit. But we do have Austin Cindric and Ryan Blaney, two Penske cars rounding out the top 20.
Yeah, and then just picking off a couple names here in the bottom 20. Kyle Larson, 24th, another, poor qualifying effort for him. Alex Bowman, his teammate, in 25th. And then we see Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in 30th. And then William Byron, who wrecked in qualifying and then had to go to the backup cars. That was just too much to fix. So definitely an eye out to look for, as he was the fastest in practice. So a big hit for that Hendrick 24.
Yeah, certainly, and that's exactly the point I wanted to go to after mentioning Elliott's poor or semi-poor qualifying effort. Well, being there on Saturday and watching these two run, the way that they actually qualify, they shoot them off about two at a time with the cars. So you have William Byron, who's about halfway through his lap. He's going into turn 2, and Elliott's just exiting turn 1. Well, for those of you that haven't been to Pocono or aren't great with the timing, it's about roughly 10 to 12 seconds to get from like the exit to 1 to like middle of 2. And William Byron would spin out of turn 2, hitting the wall pretty hard. So Elliott would be notified to basically stop his lap, and he would have to come back to the pits. They would throw 4 new Goodyears on that race car. He'd rewarm them up, get another practice lap, and he would get a qualifying lap. But I was kind of wondering if after Byron's spin, if he was told by his team to not run it quite as hard, with Byron being a teammate and being one that they were certainly not expecting to spin, especially by himself, or if he was kind of just mentally screwed up after, saying I had such a good lap going and it just got basically shut down by the guy in front of me wrecking. So it's kind of just an interesting scenario there, and actually being there to see qualifying in person, there's a lot more that goes on than what they show on TV.
Yeah, 100%. I think it could be a mix of both. I think Alex Gustafson definitely could have said, slow it down a little bit after what happened with Byron. And if I was in the car and I had to, stop my qualifying lap, I kind of mentally shocked at that point. So I think great points there. I think it could definitely be a mix of both. But moving on, that's all I got for qualifying. So if you want to kick us off right with a race, that'd be great.
Yeah, so getting right into the race, as I mentioned before, it'll be a Hamlin-Buescher front row. And just as we take the green here, we're going to see Chase Briscoe get right to it, basically. And in Pocono, we're going to mention this a ton right through the podcast and saying it from the start. It's a very tough track to pass. You got to get your spots right at the restart. When you get deeper into a run, the passing becomes almost impossible. So to see Briscoe out early, he's picked up 2 spots already here by lap 4, and he's running up in the top 4. So to see him, he's ready to go. We mentioned after all his pole efforts, would typically go back in the field. So to see him here, being the hard charger and to be the one moving forward, I think it's a great sign for that 19 team right off the bat.
Yeah, just to add your point where, the restart is the main place you want to pass. Look at William Byron. He gains 12 positions to go up to 21st after starting nearly in the back there with the wrecked race car. So, it's tough. Pocono's a difficult track with the air to pass. So off the restarts, guys are jumping, 3-4 wide down the long straight turn one. So you're going to see a lot of that. And we're going to touch on drivers who made a bunch of big, leads down into turn one. But just moving on here, Chris Buescher and Deneen are going back and forth here. But, they kind of carry away from Hocevar, who did start third with, over a second half lead for him. So you can definitely see the pace from Hamlin and Buescher, who showed speed in qualifying and in practice. So, two guys that are definitely going to be there in the end for a chance to win here at Pocono.
Yeah, then kind of moving along, lap 13, it was kind of cool being at the race because we were kind of, right in front of this over at turn 3. But we see Carson Hocevar get sideways off of turn 3, clips the outside wall, but he makes a tremendous save. He kind of almost got like on a 45-degree angle and saved himself. And, he keeps chugging along in that 4th position. But just kind of incredible stuff. You seeing that live. You saw him get super loose, save it. And, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that. Also being there in person, just the pure speed of the sport. On TV, everyone's like, it's so boring. I'm going around in circles. It doesn't look that fast. But when you're in person and the cars are, they're so fast, going by you, 170 out of turn 3, right where we were sitting, they're so loud that, your ears are ringing for a week after the race and you can feel it in your chest when they drive by. It's just the experience is really amazing. And to see basically how great of a save by Hocevar this is, he's going 160 out of turn 3. He's not doing 30 miles an hour, and to basically see that car on ice at that speed and to stay straight is beyond shows you how talented these drivers are.
Yeah, and that wall out of turn 3 kind of jumps out a little bit, kind of like Martinsville, Dover in a way, where those walls kind of come in a little bit. So just notable because he was 45 degrees sideways. But Zach, I want to ask you a question. You've been watching, pretty much every single race this year and a bunch from last season, but now you get to see your first race in person. So for anyone who's on the fence about going to see a NASCAR race, what can you tell them about how different it is from seeing it on TV to actually being there in real life?
Yeah, I mean, it was really impressive. The whole kind of day experience, the rain delay, which really sucked. We were just sitting in Max's car, chilling, being like, when are we going to be allowed into this track? Are we going to see a race today? Is it going to get pushed back to Monday? And then, going in, they opened the gates. We got our garage passes. So kind of my first real taste of just hearing how loud that car is being in the garage, them firing up the engines. And, that was kind of really impressive. But, overall, just the race as a whole, I feel like this week a lot's been talked about. Was that actually a fun race, a good race to watch, or was it boring? I heard a lot of, it's a boring racetrack. They kind of only have one lane to go on. But, being there in person, I thought it was an amazing race. Not as exciting, but kind of, being on our phones on the NASCAR app and, as we're going to talk about later, some fuel issues, some pit stops. Kind of hearing all that, I thought it was just, really good strategies there. And it just, I don't know, it was so loud, so crazy, great atmosphere. The people really showed out to Pocono. So overall, if you're on the fence about going to a race, 100% go.
Yeah, for sure. Pocono, this was a third year in the row sellout. Now, not only grandstand seats, but also infield. And in the infield, it was over 3,000 camping lots were sold. So just to see, you mentioned atmosphere is so huge at Pocono. And as I said earlier, for even for the people that, say the sport's boring and never even want to give it a shot, people that may basically crap on the sport week in and week out. But when you're there, it's a completely different experience. Even if you don't get a good race or, what wouldn't look like a good race on TV, just the atmosphere basically, I would say, doubles the experience. So it's just such an awesome time, just the whole weekend in general.
Yeah, perfectly well said, guys. So, it's a lot more than drivers just turning left and going in circles. So, definitely cool to see a race in person. But in the end here at the stage here, we see Suarez short pit from 11th, so a strategy call for the Trackhouse team. And then, we see a couple other guys come in. So, to boost track position in the track like Pocono, that's the name of the game, getting track position. But then Hamlin win the stage one. Busher in second, Red in third, Briscoe and Eric Jones rounding out that top 5. So another incredible run for Eric Jones, getting another top 5 in his stage these last few races. But no surprises for Denny Hamlin, stage one, 7-time winner. So you could definitely see that he was the favorite going into the stage 3 to win this thing.
Yeah, not only did we mention it's difficult to pass, but he leads every lap. And we see Chris Buescher in second. He's followed him second every single lap. Tyler Reddick moves up. Briscoe, I mentioned he was up to fourth right off the start from lap 4. So he sits in fourth for 26 straight laps. And Eric Jones moves forward after the guys in front of him that pit. So, you don't see a whole lot of position changing. Strategy is the name of the game at Pocono, with passing being very difficult. But to see Hamlin stay out for the stage points is kind of interesting to me. I did want to mention that I kind of thought a lot of your cars that have already won, I thought we would see flip the stage. Because when you're flipping a stage, typically those are the cars that are going to, be there, I feel like, at the end. So to see Hamlin not flip this stage surprised me a little bit, and allow Buescher, Reddick, Briscoe, Jones, the guys that haven't won yet, to be the ones to stay out, get the points, as points are largely crucial right now. So that was definitely interesting to me. But that is the top 5 for stage 1, and I'll let one of you get into stage 2 unless you have any points to make on any of the top 5 there.
Yeah, I just want to mention quick. We saw Hamlin get out to lead, right away, but just how crucial clean air is at Pocono. He, like you said, Max, he led every single lap. So kind of watching it live, being there, you see Chris Buescher in those straightaways, get close. And as soon as they get into those turns, he hits that dirty air and he loses track position. So, like we're going to talk about kind of the rest of the race, dirty air is, not good here.
Yeah, for sure. I don't got anything else to add for stage 1, but I think it's good that you mentioned dirty air. We're going to get into that more as we get into stage 3. But, pit stops were obviously a question as guys were short pitting. But Chris Buescher comes off first on pit road, and just perfect execution from him to get out in front of Hamlin. And that's just kind of the stuff you need to see out of him, who's just in that cut line, and that's not really a place you want to be, especially after what he went through last year doing the same thing. So good stuff from RFK here in stage 1. But obviously, Mike Kozlowski was one of the guys who short pit with Ty Gibbs and Hocevar on his inside to start the restart. So I'll let one of you guys take over for stage 2 here.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump right in here with the Keselowski-Gibbs front row. As you mentioned, they both did short pit prior to the end of the stage, would flip the stage, and Hamlin and his group that stayed out to get the stage points would fall back in the field a little bit right behind the guys that pitted before the end of the stage, which would be around 5th. But, no sooner does do those cars short pit, and we're getting into the second stage run. Hamlin's up to 4th, and we see our first caution with Riley Herbst in the 35, looks to blow a tire from 30th in turn 1, hitting the outside wall.
Yeah, and this was interesting. Unfortunately, we couldn't really see this from where our seats were as we were more down turn 3. But at first, kind of thought it was a blown tire, an issue. But now, as we're going to talk about Bubba Wallace, what happened with him. I think this is kind of a brake rotor issue for Herbst and for majority of 2311, as we're going to talk about them soon. But a very hard hit in that turn 1 wall for Herbst, and I think he was running in 30th, but just out of nowhere, just brings us the caution in lap 42. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to this, as I think it was a brake rotor, but I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, no, not really. But like you said, we kind of, if it was a brake rotor, kind of a big thing we saw with those 2311 cars, which, like you mentioned with Bubba Wallace, is going to be a talking point during this race too.
Yeah, certainly. And we're definitely going to mention his name soon enough. But, getting back to the races, we had a bunch of guys come down pit road for some repairs. Biggest name, Chris Buescher, was was running up there in the top 5, but Brad Keselowski would still lead us with Hocevar now on the inside getting into the restart. And this is where we kind of see some of the guys in 5th and 6th jump out into the 3 or 4 wide down the Long Pond Straight, which if you don't know is one of the longer, I think it is the longest straightaway in NASCAR. So guys are going 4 or 5 wide, and this is really the first time we really saw that entering turn 1. But just as soon as this green flag run starts, here we go, Bubba Wallace. We're going to talk about him. It says here in our notes, it says a tire failure. Well, it was, but that brake rotor would completely explode, and he would smash the outside wall in turn 3 and kind of ride it all the way around until we eventually came to a halt and made it to pit road. But that brake rotor would fall on the track and would be smoking. So it was extremely hot and obviously a problem for the 2311 guys.
Yeah, real interesting. I don't really understand why 2311's having these problems, especially at Pocono. It was a really hot day, and that's putting it mildly. It's been super hot here in PA, and especially up in the Poconos, and which is way above average compared to past races here. And it's a simple overheating issue. I think that's a big part of it. We saw this with a lot of cars at Gateway, St. Louis in previous years with brake rotors blowing up. But, I don't really think it should be happening at Pocono, as you're not braking a ton compared to tracks like Gateway. So I think it has a lot to do with just the heat that there was on Sunday, because I personally don't think, if it's not as hot as it was, I don't think we're seeing either of those accidents.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. But kind of moving along, big talking point for the weekend, an absolutely mind-boggling move by Brad Keselowski, who enters pit road despite it being closed. So Hocevar takes the lead after that. But, we're just going to jump right into it, guys. What happened?
I mean, and I was watching Hamlin's podcast, sorry, he explained this perfectly. You have 2 points of reference. The back of the pace car, which he was right behind as he was in the lead, is flashing red, and then it flashes green to let you know it's open. And you have a big, giant stoplight-looking thing on the entrance of pit road that says it's closed. At first, when I was watching the seats, I was like, okay, he went in and no one followed him. And then I looked at the pit road's open, and there's a flashing red light at my face, and I'm like, what is he doing? So, I mean, it's hard not to really make fun of him here, but just, I don't know if he was just blind or locked in that much that he just didn't even see the red lights, but man, tough break as he had a lot of speed here.
Yeah, what an interesting situation. It's a rookie mistake for a big-time veteran. So, I don't really understand how it even happens. You mentioned, the 2 points of reference, and yeah, I don't even know. Yeah, I heard the radio communication with spotter TJ Majors, and he goes, sorry guys, screwed up. And, the only reason I can think of why he might have pit is if cars behind him were baiting him. But, you don't listen to the noise around you. Listen to the, your team, and listen to the lights in front of you. They're not going to lie to you. So I don't know. As I said right at the beginning of my little talking point here, it's a rookie mistake from a veteran driver.
Yeah, 100%. That's a perfect way to explain it. Just a rookie mistake. But now we'd see most of the lead lap cars pit, and we'd see Denny Hamlin emerge off pit road after only taking 2 tires. So another judgment call from the team with Chris Gale, and it's a good one, as you can see Joey Logano and Austin Cindric lead 2 Penske guys for the first time on the restart.
Yeah, so getting right back to green, we're going to see Logano easily clear in turn 1. This is no surprise, as we saw it with Hamlin. We saw it with Keselowski before he made his mistake. But moving a little deeper into the run, this is exactly what I wanted to mention. And I said this right before the podcast started, that I wanted to make this a fairly big talking point. And it's that Hocevar in one lap was able to go from 19th to 6th, the plus 13 spots, which is, alien-like for Pocono. So whatever he was doing on that lap, I have not seen footage of the lap. I would love to, but I guess this guy just thought he was playing a video game with how the amount of passes he made there, and about 2.5 miles of impossible passing racetrack.
Yeah, I saw the onboard video of it, and I mean, it's just what you talked about at the beginning. Just off the restarts, and he jumped way inside. He passed Larson, passed like 3 or 4 guys before he got to turn 1, and I mean, he just kept rolling with the momentum. That's the biggest thing at Pocono, because once you get caught in the air, like we're going to talk about at the end of this race, it's over. You're not going to be able to pass anyone. So it was an incredible drive by Hocevar to get up to 6th position from 19th. And that's kind of why we see a lot of wrecks in turn 1, because guys going 4, 5, 6 wide and, just running like all hell going into that turn. So it worked out for him. And, after the almost wreck he had at a 3, it's a great way to rebound, going into the end of stage 2 here.
Yeah, especially for a rookie guy who needs a win to make the playoffs. It almost seemed like he was playing NASCAR Heat 5 out there on rookie mode. But, just his speed's incredible. And, I'd honestly be really shocked if we don't see him win a race by playoff time.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Shout out NASCAR Heat 5, no longer available anymore. So sad. Super sad. Love that game. But get back to racing. And then here's where we see a very fun point. We see Hocevar and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in 2nd and 3rd. And obviously Hocevar's team is going to tell him to just approach the situation intelligently, and not do anything dumb, as he was behind Ricky. So I was kind of standing up in my seat waiting to see if anything would happen. Nothing did end up happening, but I'm certain Ricky knew that he was behind him, and I'm certain Hocevar was thinking, what's going to happen here. But we see Alex Bowman and Joey Logano switch positions, as Alex Bowman will take the lead and kind of shift the voice over to Max if you have anything to say on the Hocevar and Ricky situation here, as you are a Ricky fan.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to go right there. And from the start of the race, I found it hilarious. The 47 car, even being a Stenhouse fan, this car was slow. Like, I am talking slow. We saw this car start 30th. He's getting passed by these cars in the back, and cars that should not be passing the 47 car, especially with how well he's been running early in this race. And they were able to make good adjustments by this point and make the car better, but it still definitely shouldn't have been up in the lead. And Hocevar was easily competing for the lead, especially with, he just went on his blitz of how many cars he just passed. So see him pull up behind Stenhouse here, and he's like, Stenhouse is running, half a second a lap slower than the leader, and Hocevar is just scared to pass him. So now Stenhouse is like, I screwed this guy out of the lead and what could have possibly been an opportunity for the winning. He's like, is he like, now I'm good? Or is he like, nah, I'm not done yet. I'm going to get him at Atlanta, or, I'm going to get him one of these coming weeks. I'm curious to hear, Zach, maybe your opinion on this, or Luke, even yours.
Yeah. Just from the interviews and, the way he's still talking about it, I think at some point he's going to get him. And I think at that point he's going to wreck him, and it's going to be a one and done type thing. But yeah, one of the points I wanted to mention too, kind of listening to the radio and stuff like that, hearing Hocevar, his crew chief, they were next to each other, and he just said, "Don't do anything stupid." So I thought that was just like a little funny thing right there.
Yeah, 100%. And, exactly what Hocevar needs to hear. But, Ricky mentioned after the race that he doesn't even really want to give Hocevar publicity anymore and all that stuff. But I know what Ricky's going to do. He's going to wreck Hocevar when it matters most, when he's in, maybe he makes the playoffs and, he needs to make it around the 16 or whatever. Or maybe he needs to get a good run to make it in the playoffs, and that's when Ricky's going to strike. And he's going to hurt him when it matters most, and that's what he needs to exactly do to just say, hey, you can't just run over the veterans of the sport. And, Hocevar being a young buck, he's going the hard way. And I feel like he already has multiple times, but one more time wouldn't hurt. So, yeah, Ricky's going to get him when it matters most, 100%.
Right. You say matters most, and, I've been looking at this a little different ways. And, sometimes I don't actually think that. I'm like, maybe he won't wreck him. Maybe he's not going to slow him down. Maybe this comes down to Daytona, where Hocevar is leading and Stenhouse has the option to push him for the win, get him in the playoffs, and he's going to push that outside line. Maybe it's Keselowski and Hocevar side by side coming out of turn 4 at Daytona, and Stenhouse decides to go with Brad instead of Hocevar. It could be something as simple as that, and everything Hocevar has been working for this season could go right up in flames right there as he's about to win his way in.
Yeah, 100% agree that it could definitely come down to Daytona, and I can't wait to see what happens. But getting back into the Pocono racing, another thing here we see Mike McDowell. He was experiencing brake problems earlier, and that thing finally exploded as well. So not just a 2311 problem while he's running in 26th. And unfortunately, I did not get to see this wreck happen as I was not in the grandstands at the time. But I don't know if you guys have anything else to add for it, but it just looks like a simple brake rotor explosion to me.
Yeah, I was in the stands, but very difficult to really see anything. As we mentioned, this again was all the way down in turn 1, and we were sitting at the exit of turn 3. And I'm going to make it a quick little segment here and kind of go off on a tangent. But another thing is people don't give the track enough kudos for how big it really is. Like when you're sitting in turn 3, you cannot see turn 1 and you can barely see turn 2. So it really just goes to show you how big that track is. And when they're going down the short chute, which they call the straightaway between turns 2 and 3, the drivers are basically barreling right at you at about 180 miles an hour, and it still takes them about 10 seconds to get to you. So that really goes to show you how big the track really is. But getting back on track to this, there was nothing to really see until he would eventually come slowly around, exiting turn 3 and taking the access road and getting to pit road, which would end up bringing out a caution about 2-3 laps later as there would be debris. I think it was a tire ended up blowing after the brake rotor would go. I think the brake rotor might have shot a piece of metal or something into the tire, leading the carcass to end up on the racetrack and needing to throw the caution. But that's all I really got for that. I don't think there was a whole lot to elaborate on that. Very similar to the Herps and Wallace situations.
Yeah, 100% agree. But, before that caution came out, we see Chase Briscoe pit from 12th, and this would be a very good call as he's going to get a bunch of track position as that debris caution came out for that blown carcass tire. But just want to touch on Brad Keselowski, who had penalties during the last caution. Blaney had a speeding penalty, so he would have to start in the back, and then Brad just had that brain dead moment. But they would be up to 15th and 16th, so obviously their cars were not slow. So it's not easy, like you mentioned, to get track position at this track. So great drives from them, but I've got nothing else on the caution matter with Michael McDowell here.
Yeah, so moving on to the restart, we're going to again see it's going to be a Stenhouse Hocevar front row, but as soon as we go green, we're wrecking again. And it kind of seems like cautions are starting to breed cautions here, which is kind of an uncommon thing to see at Pocono. And we're going to see Kyle Busch spin off of turn 2. He's going to collect some cars with him, trying to avoid recklessly, that being Zane Smith, the 88 of SVG, 10 of Ty Dillon, and even the 20 of Christopher Bell, who would have a little bit of nose damage after hitting the inside wall.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't really have too much to say as I wasn't, again, in the grandstands this time. We were down by, the haulers in the merge station, but it just looks like a mistake from Kyle Busch to me. And Bell would, hits the inside wall, and SVG would get involved. So, another tough run for Kyle Busch, who has had a ton of success here with JGR. But some of the worst success here with RCR. So it's a similar trait with him, but I got nothing else really to say on this one. Just looks like a simple self-spin.
Yeah, it kind of seems just like touching on, Busch. I was watching a couple of podcasts, after the race and listening to Steve Letarte and a couple of, the other big NASCAR analysts had to say it almost seems like he is pushing the car too hard. I don't know if you guys have any input on this because, this is kind of like one of my first years watching NASCAR, but kind of going back a couple of generations of cars, it almost seems like he feels like he's in those cars and he hasn't really had a good feel for, this gen, car. And he's almost pushing it too hard, which is causing him to self-wreck. And, I don't know. I don't really know what's going on with him because, he was so dominant for so long and it just seems like he's kind of, really out of it this year.
Yeah, it's a very valid point. We saw what would be, Luke, you could correct me on this, but is it his only win in the next gen car at Auto Club?
He had Talladega, and then I think he had another one, and he also had Bristol Dirt, but that doesn't really count.
Oh, right. Yeah. The leaders reckon themselves. But anyway, Auto Club being his really only, fully skill based win in the next gen car, and that being one of the first races in the car. So he kind of was on the same baseline as everyone else and might have had a better shot at it, being one of the better drivers to maybe adapt quicker. But, since then, it's as everyone else is adapting, it kind of looks like he's gone in the wrong direction. And when I saw the turn 2 camera here from the outside wall, it almost looked like he washed up the track a little bit. So, Zach, I'm really glad you made the point you did about him, pushing the car too hard. This car, when you're pushing it too hard, this thing is on ice, especially through turn 2 here at Pocono. It's an extremely difficult corner. It comes up on you, basically. It sneaks up on you. And he tried to enter from the bottom, which, Luke, I know you know this, but entering turn 2 from the bottom does not work no matter how hard you lift. So, he's completely out of the gas with a car on his outside. And so he doesn't wreck the car on his outside. He ends up spinning himself out. So that's pretty much all I got on that.
Yeah, I'll just say a few more things to add on to you guys. As I absolutely love Kyle Busch and everything he's done. But, I mean, like Max said, you got to race the racetrack and you got to race what your car gives you. And, I'm just going to make an interesting point here. I don't think he knows how to run a car that is this slow. I mean, look at the equipment he's been in at Hendrick in the 5 and then JGR in the 18. I mean, the 8 and RCR. I mean, the RCR is just absolutely a joke of a team in the modern era of NASCAR. They absolutely suck, and I'm not even joking. It's horrible to see what that team has become, especially with the legacy that they had with Dale Earnhardt Sr. But, I mean, the car is nowhere near what the 18 JGR car used to be. So I just don't think he knows how to run a car this slow. And also, it's Kyle Busch. He's not going to be he's not going to give anything up. He's not going to give any position. He's going to run as hard as he can. And the car that he's in is just not allowing him to do that. So, I think he had one fluke season in 2023 where he got 3 wins. And, everyone thought that it was going to be okay with this car, but I saw right through it. So, I think it's great points and a great question that you asked, Zach. But, this has completely just killed pretty much his career, this 8 car. It really sucks.
Right. You mentioned I think that right now there's a lot of pent-up frustration. That's a big thing for him right now. And when you're frustrated, you're not going to run well. And not only do I think frustration is a problem, but you also mentioned the equipment that RCR is supplying right now. The last time I feel like we saw an RCR car have a good shot to win a race was, Austin Dillon, back in like 2022, about to win the Coca-Cola 600. So it's really just been tough luck for RCR right now. And ever since the first 2 years of this next gen car, I honestly can't think of many shots where this team has had good opportunities to win races.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything, the points we made there, and just tough to see for Kyle Busch, who's such an asset and such a guy that gets people to watch the sport. But I can only hope for the best for him as he has another 2 years with RCR here. But getting back into the racing, and we see Reddit after this caution's out, he's experiencing brake problems. So that's all 32311 cars, and you'd have to go behind the wall back to the garage just to get this thing sorted out. So I don't know what was going on with them, but just a tough run for all of these guys who desperately need it, as they are, kind of leaking their way out of the playoffs here.
Yeah, for sure. Nothing is guaranteed at this point in the season. And Tyler Reddick, you might have been thinking 2 weeks ago, oh, this guy's locked in on points. It's going to be easy for him to make it. The only guy in front of him on points is Elliott. There's no real challenge. No one's close to him behind him. But, we're seeing a lot of new winners here. We see SVG at Mexico City, and I don't want to spoil our winner yet for Pocono for those that, might not have seen the race results. But we do get another new winner, which is, not something we were expecting at Pocono. And, a lot of people said there's no way we get 16 winners. There's no way we get 16 winners. But, we're starting to play with that bubble a little bit, with some of these tracks that are left. We're seeing some road courses. So those are completely up in the air. Who knows? You might see maybe a Michael McDowell strike at one of those. That could be a win there. We have Daytona, Atlanta. Those are 2 wild cards. That could be 3 wins right there. And if Tyler Reddick, doesn't get his act together here, this could get real ugly real fast for that 45 team.
Yeah, and you say, like you said a couple of weeks ago, thinking he's safe on points. He's really struggled these last couple of weeks. One top 10 in the last 6 weeks, which was at Nashville, and he only got 9th there. So it just seems like if he keeps struggling, keeps running low, maybe he won't even get in on points. So it's just, I don't know, tough for Reddick for sure. And like you said, there's so many toss-up races as we go down the end of the stretch that he needs to kind of figure his stuff out.
100%. Back into the restart. And just another point I want to touch on, Chase Briscoe leading here. So that track position and that pit stop will work out wonderfully. But just another guy I want to touch on here. Josh Berry and Stenhouse would battle for second. And, Max, you can correct me if I'm wrong as you were here on Saturday, but I think Josh Berry broke a diffuser in practice or qualifying. So to see that car running in the top 2 is just incredible. I don't know when he broke it. I'm not sure if it was practice diffuser. I saw it in my notes here. But just to get that thing fixed and have a car that can contend for the lead at this point in the race is incredible stuff here.
Yeah, you mentioned the Josh Berry situation. Some things are kind of weird when you're there in person. You get to see a lot of things that the broadcast doesn't cover, but there's also a lot of things that the broadcast does cover, like audio communications or, data about the cars that you don't find out. So actually, someone that was watching the broadcast would probably have a better understanding of this than I would, which is, kind of funny to say. But I did see this car get pushed behind the wall during practice. So knew they had a problem. And during practice, this car was bottom of the board slow. So you knew there was something up, but, never really thought too much of it. But to see this car running well here, about halfway through the race, looking great for the Wood Brothers 21 car. And it's been a few rough weeks, the past few weeks, and to see it rolling back in the right direction again, it's great stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And we see him up here in the top 5 for multiple laps. As Stenson and Byron would engage in a 3-wide battle in turn 2, and that's always a dangerous place to be, going even 2 wide and then the tunnel turn. So that car had the pace to be up there, and talking about another Hendrick guy in Chase Elliott, who's advancing his way up after starting a little bit further back in the field. So just great stuff for all for these guys to stick it out in this Pocono heat and work on these passes and really try to contend for the top spot and for their stage win here. So, but no further on here, we see Chase Briscoe win stage 2, a huge win and a huge playoff point and a huge 10 points for him. That's Josh Berry in second place, Chase Elliott in third, William Byron and Chris Buescher. So huge stage points for all these guys. Not really William Byron already is locked in the playoffs, but everyone else, great stage finishes for them.
Yeah, for sure. We mentioned Buescher's having a great day. Here he is in 5th. More stage points is exactly what he needs. He's right on that bubble. And we mentioned Reddick not being safe and as many points as he has. Well, Buescher's a little further down, and that bubble is just going to get tougher. And where Buescher sits right now, if he doesn't get a win, that's not going to stand. It's kind of tough to say, but if someone around where he is does not get a win, they are not going to make the playoffs. It's kind of as simple as that. But to see teams like him getting these points and knowing that they need to run well, they need the momentum, it is really good to see and to know that this team has speed and the potential for them to win a race is definitely there.
100%.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Zach, as you're a Buescher fan, I want to hear your thoughts on this. As after his post-race interview, he said, we're win hunting, and with where he was last year and couldn't get that win, he wants to be locked in the playoffs. So, what are your thoughts on with the races we have left? As we have Daytona and Richmond and Atlanta, which he could win at. Do you think he ends up winning, or he points his way in, or what do you think happens here as we are moving into the final races of the season?
Yeah, me being a Buescher fan, a little bit of biased answer. I do think he gets it done. The speed he's shown in these last couple of weeks, he has a top 10 car right now. I think he's a top 10 driver. But as I'm going to touch on a little bit later in the podcast, he has to be better on the restarts. Has a costly mistake in Michigan that I personally think cost him the race. I don't think they touched on it enough on the broadcast. He got a little loose there, lost 2 track positions to end up being one of them being Hamlin, who won that race. But yeah, he's got to get better on those restarts. We see him. I think it was either 2 or 3 times I saw in this race he lost 2 or 3 track positions, and 2 big restarts there. So especially at a track like Pocono, where you need every spot you can get with that dirty air. That's one thing he definitely needs to work on. But a guy who's been really good at road courses, who has the speed to be good at a super speedway. I think he gets it done, but he's got to put together those restarts and complete a full race.
Yeah, I love everything you said there, and I agree with you. I do think he gets it done, and as we're going to talk about with the restart issues, it's a great point to touch on. But getting back into the restart here as we cross lap 100, we see Chase Briscoe stay up there in the lead as Chris Buescher in second place and Hamlin. So a lot of guys that we're going to talk a lot on as we head into the ending of stage 3 here. But quickly we see Ryan Blaney and Josh Berry battling for 5th. And one thing we mentioned with Ryan Blaney, I know we mentioned him coming from the back twice. And one thing I didn't even notice during the race, but afterwards, his cool suit was failed. So he had no, airflow to his body, and his air conditioning was not working properly. So that car was probably piping hot, and I know how hot it was there at the track. So he's very frustrated, I'm sure, with being that hot. So I'm just not to glaze, but just incredible stuff for him to be still up here in the top 5, as having a cool suit fail is not the most ideal thing to happen at a track like this in the summer heat.
Yeah, we've said in past weeks, Blaney is a super emotional guy. So when things happen like this, he's going to express his emotion, his frustrations, and to see him maintaining this positioning, you said, you're biased with Blaney, of course, but it's a phenomenal job being there and dripping sweat with how hot it was after the storm passed in the morning. It's you could only imagine how hot it was in that car with the engine and just the heat in general beating on the car. So it just probably goes to show you, NASCAR drivers are athletes. They don't get the credit they deserve.
Yeah, 100% agree. And as he's running in this 4th position, this is where we're kind of going to see guys make their most crucial pit stop of the race, as we see Cindric in 6th and Berry in 8th. 2 Fords make their pit stops as Chase Briscoe a lap later, and Kyle Larson with Ryan Preece, Hocevar, and Byron all come in on lap 120. And this is where execution matters. Like I'm going to keep saying with these last 10 races or so, execution on pit road and execution on the race. That is how you win races. And with who we're going to see win, the point just keeps building on itself. So you have to be perfect on pit road, and you have to let the driver do his thing, as we're going to see here. So a crucial pit stop for the guys I just mentioned.
Yeah, and right after the pit stop here, and just about everyone that will be in contention for this race did pit, so it's not going to change anything there. But SVG is going to end up spinning off of turn 1, which will bring out the caution, and it's going to bring us down, kind of to the nitty gritty here. Last about 30 laps to really see a battle for the win, and it's going to bring us to a very, very important point that I'll let one of you get into.
Just before we get into that point, I just have a question for you guys. I saw a lot of stuff on social media that said they shouldn't have brought out the caution for this. I don't know, if I'm missing something, because just having 2 other people here maybe can enlighten me. But I mean, he was halfway sideways and wasn't refiring. So I don't know if you guys saw something different, but was the caution correct, or should they not have thrown it out? I'm just confused, as a lot of people were saying that on social media.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings with this one. So whether it's good cop, bad cop, and whichever one you think I am, I'll say it first. But here's first scenario, and here's the first opinion. He's all by himself. He's running in the back. There's no traffic approaching. Doesn't refire right away, but he will eventually. He causes no danger to any traffic, right? No reason to throw a caution. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two, we see cars 45 degrees sideways, spinning out, smoke in the air, not refiring. Oh, God, leaders are going to be coming. It's only a 50-some second lap. That's another scenario. You got to throw the caution. So those are the two scenarios, and the one I'm going to side with here is you got to throw the caution. And we saw this, I can't remember if it was last year or a few years ago at this point, but it's with Ryan Preece sitting between turns 2 and 3, about to go a lap down with Denny Hamlin coming around on the white flag, and they refused to throw the caution until Hamlin was practically right at him within a football field of him, which in NASCAR terms is not far, So, and I don't think NASCAR made the right decision there. So the fact that NASCAR did throw the caution here, I think they learned from the past with that Hamlin Preece kind of incident a while back, and I think they corrected themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should have been a caution. I think kind of one of the things that maybe people are so fired up on social media is they kind of, as we're going to talk about a little bit, soon in the podcast, a little fuel issue for a certain somebody. So, seeing those, laps be green, I think the race plays out a little bit differently. So maybe a couple, not to spoil it, but a couple number 11 fans right there, maybe they're saying that. But I think, it was a deserved caution.
Yeah, and here we go. This is the restart where we were all standing in our seats waiting, as this is huge. Chase Briscoe and Denny Hamlin with Ryan Blaney behind them, Chase Elliott in fourth, and Chris Buescher right behind them. And you mentioned restarts being really the only place you can pass for the lead and pass for track position. This is huge. So, but Chase Briscoe and Denny Hamlin would kind of pull away and battle for that lead. But here we go, as we were following along kind of with the NASCAR timeline to give us more information while we were watching the race. Hamlin and Briscoe reported that they were going to be short on fuel here. And I believe, not sure about Hamlin, I believe Briscoe was 6 laps short on fuel at this point. I know, Zach or Max, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. So the name of the game for these two is just save your fuel. And as we're going to get into a lot of talking points here and how hard it is to pass, saving fuel at this track is probably your best friend here. So if Chase Briscoe wants to win this race, it's going to have to be an incredible ride for that team.
Yeah, you mentioned the 6 lap short. You're pretty close. It was about 4 or 5 laps, so it's still going to be almost an impossible save here to the end of the race. But we're going to see with about 19 to go, top 4 here, they're all under a blanket within about a second. So you can see that Briscoe and Hamlin, those two JGR cars, they're slowing up the hungry dogs behind them that do have fuel. Blaney, Elliott, Buescher, and they're pulling a lot closer, but. We're going to continue to see Briscoe save a little bit more fuel for about the next few laps, but then he's going to stretch out his lead a little bit. He's going to go to about just over half a second over Hamlin. So now you start to wonder, is he good on fuel? This guy's going about 90-95% through down straightaways and going maybe 50% to what they normally would in the corners. So he still is hauling for being a short on fuel, as they're saying.
Yeah, for sure, and as he's saving here, and as we're getting close to the end of this race, we would inform the team that he's potentially now half a lap short. So an incredible job saving, but this dirty air is one of the worst I've ever seen at Pocono. As I've been there 3 times now. Hamlin's obviously running full as he can now make it. Blaney's 100% running full throttle as hard as he can to try to catch these guys, and just lap after lap as they were coming around. I mean, I saw little to nothing move for these guys, and still as we're lap 153 moving into the end at lap 160, we have still not yet seen a pass for the lead yet. So I saw a lot of people on social media very, very upset and blaming the car, but this is just what Pocono happened in Gen 6 car. I know what happened with the Gen 5, and it's just kind of the name of the game. Pocono is a 1-lane track. Dirty air is obviously going to be a main factor there. It's just kind of how it is. Zach, I know you've been watching a lot of podcasts and have some information more on this, so I'll let you make your points. But I know a lot of people were furious after this race.
Yeah. I think I just want to start off by, giving Briscoe credit where credit's due. A lot of talk about the dirty air, and ultimately he was in front. So kind of what led him to win the race. But, his whole fuel saving strategy and, the way he was able to execute that. And like we mentioned, and, kind of were, saying, last couple of races with those 3 poles in a row saying, he's got to put one together. He's got to put one together. And, just super impressive stuff here, especially for a guy who jumps into this 19 car. That's got to be a super stressful situation for him, getting into the Joe Gibbs Racing, feeling like you got to execute, you got to win, especially for racing like a team like that. And, to finally get that win in the book, good stuff for him right there. But yeah, I was watching a lot of podcasts. What was really interesting is listening to what Denny Hamlin had to say, especially in those last couple laps. We kind of talked about how he kind of understood that there was no chance of him passing Briscoe at all. So he was saying how if he knew Briscoe was good on fuel, he was going to try to make some crazy move to pass him because he's already not in the playoffs. And he, at that point, he was just going for the win. But because he didn't really know if Briscoe was good or not, he wanted to make sure that, if Briscoe was short, he was in that second spot so he could end up winning the race. So yeah, dirty air is crazy. And like I mentioned earlier with, in the first stage with, Buescher not being able to pass Hamlin at all. It was kind of just the same story. We saw Denny get a little closer going into those corners. And as soon as he got close to the car, that dirty air, pushed them back, ended up going half a second back. So, yeah, just Pocono being Pocono.
And, you mentioned it, but, Briscoe goes on to win this race. It's a great job fuel saving. It's already been elaborated on plenty of how he's able to keep this lead. He doesn't have to run full throttle to keep the lead, which, Pocono gets the hate it does. But, I'm not the one, to say because Pocono sold out, the last 3 years. So no matter what show of racing that Pocono seems to put on, the fans don't really care, and they seem to show out every single year. So, it might not have been the most entertaining on TV, but Chase Briscoe brings this home, and it's a phenomenal job for this 19 team. They have been seeking this week in and week out, especially recently. They've been putting up all those polls or 3 in a row, so that to get this finally accomplished is huge. Chase Briscoe said in a post-race conference, he goes, with Joe Gibbs Racing, it felt like he weighed half the weight he did going in, leaving the track. He goes, because, the expectation with Joe Gibbs Racing, he goes, you're not expected to get top 3s, top 5s. You're expected to win, which I think is crazy. But when you're in a car that good and, you have teammates as good as they are, winning 3 races a season, with Bell and Hamlin, you have high standards to meet. And if you're not winning races, or you might be, for lack of better words, kind of failing your team.
100% agree. And obviously a huge weight lifted off his shoulders there for the 19 car. But before we get into the end of the race, I got a question over a text, not on Spotify. So it's kind of a 2-part question here. So and it kind of ties into what we were just talking about. So that's why I wanted to do before we get into the finishing the results. But first question is, how hot does it usually get in the car? And I'll let one of you answer this, but first off, I'll say it kind of depends on what track and how hot it is really outside. But I believe it's kind of like 120 to 140 just in the car. Usually in these summer races, that's what it gets. I'm not sure about, in the fall or springtime, but that's pretty much how hot it gets for a track like Pocono.
Yeah, this is a tough question to answer. I'm not the one in the cars, but there was that one race that I do remember at Richmond. Was it last year, Luke?
I believe so, yeah.
Where I think it was your car, Ryan Blaney. I think it was. I can't remember the temperature. My memory's not serving me a little bit, but this car was hot. And you might remember the number better than I do.
I think it was close to 160.
Yeah, I think you're right. So
but this is kind of a similar for our question I said, and I'll kind of bring my 2 thoughts on this. And what is the issue with the cooling suit? So first off, for anyone who doesn't know what a cooling suit is, it's basically I'll try to you're watching on Spotify, you can see my face. It's kind of like a undershirt with a bunch of tubes on your abdomen and back, and there's a long tube that hangs out your side out of the fire suit and plugs into the car. That coolant can run through these tubes. So to keep the driver cool and their body cool, because the AC and water just isn't enough for these summer races. So a bunch of guys will wear this underneath their fire suit. But if this thing fails, it's just going to run hot water through your tubes and into your stomach and back, and it's just going to make you miserable. So obviously Ryan Blaney would have to unplug it from the car. And the issue with them, I mean, we just really saw them this year. So I think at these summer races and just how hot the car gets, and, you know, the coolant not really flowing too well with these cars, it's obviously not going to flow into your suit that well. So I think it's kind of just a beta thing right now as we're seeing them for the first time, and I'm sure it will get sorted out soon enough. But when you're racing in a race car that gets, you know, up to 140 and an engine that gets oil temp that gets over 260, obviously, you know, coolant is not going to last nearly as long as you might think it would. So I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to this, but that's just kind of my 2 cents.
I've really got nothing. You nailed pretty much every point there was to say on that. And Zach, unless you got anything.
Yeah, no, not really. You kind of nailed everything right there.
All right, well, that makes it easy enough. But, you know, you guys want to take us right into the finishing results?
Yeah, I'll jump right into it. You know, of course, we see Chase Briscoe. He's the winner. Hamlin, Blaney, Buescher, Elliott. It's an easy top 5. You know, they were running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, basically the entire last run after the SVG spin. One thing to mention, Hamlin has the Xfinity fastest lap. And of course, he said it in the first stage when he was rolling. So, because not to, you know, kind of attack Pocono, but you can't set it running second. So, we've talked about enough already. But other notable finishers in the top 10, we got Nemechek, Priest, Keselowski, who would rebound to a 9th place finish, and even Austin Cindric running 10th. Great efforts for them and good rebounds from Keselowski especially.
Yeah, you know, being a Buescher and RFK fan, I just want to give a huge shout out to that team over there. You know, 2 of the last 3 races, all 3 of their drivers, you know, scored top 10s, which is just, you know, super impressive and just, you know, goes to show their speed at these tracks.
Yeah, and I just want to, you know, pat ourselves on the back. Max and I said it all year, just wait till the second half of the season for RFK, because they're going to flip a switch, and they are proving it right now. So for anyone who didn't believe us, we'll go. The results speak for themselves. And I told you guys this was going to happen. RFK is going to be a problem moving into the fall. So I'm pulling for him. I absolutely love that team. So, you know, hopefully they get themselves locked in the playoffs. But some other notable drivers in, you know, 10 through 20 range, we see Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman in 11, who was running up there all day in the top 10. So he gets a great finish, and definitely one that's going to help him out as he is right on that cut line. Josh Berry in 12 had that diffuser issue, rebounds for a top 15 day. Then we see Daniel Suarez with a much-needed top 15 here to get the ball back rolling and, you know, try to have a more of a respectable season here going in to the end of the regular season.
Yeah, kind of moving along, seeing other notable names. We see Logano outside the top 15. You know, Christopher Bell, who's, you know, struggled a little bit recently, but, you know, he kind of got tied up in that, Busch wreck. So kind of tough day for him. We see Hocevar in 18th, you know, after, you know, a really good start, early run, saw some speed there. And then rounding out the top 20, we see Kyle Busch.
Yeah, and going a little further back in the field, we see the cars that the cautions just didn't really wave the way these drivers wanted them to. They were kind of the drivers on that opposite strategy that, you know, if there's some crashes that fall at just a little different times, these are guys that, you know, it sounds crazy to say, but guys that we might have seen leading the race at the end. And, you know, those names being Chastain, Byron, Gill, and Stenhouse, those cars, they were running well in the second stage, didn't get the cautions to fall their way, and killed the finishing positions, unfortunately, and would put them just right in front of the, per se, the DNF cars of Reddick, Ty Dillon, Brennan Poole, who we didn't elaborate on at all, but I do want to give him a quick shout out, you know, being there in person. And, you know, even though it's not a run that you want to see from a car, it's kind of really goes to show you that those cars that aren't running well, they're still giving it their all. They're on the racetrack every single lap. They don't get the TV time, you know, but for the effort that these guys put in, they don't get, you know, sometimes they don't get the, maybe not fame, but they don't exactly get what they deserve.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's all I have for the finishing order. But another point I want to bring up before we conclude the podcast, the in-season challenge, NASCAR starts this week at Atlanta, which will be streamed on TNT, not on Prime. Prime finished their 5 races, so it switches over to TNT for the next 5, and I'll just go over some of the more notable first-round matchups for you guys. Make sure you guys fill out your bracket for a chance to win $1 million, as long as as well as the drivers have a chance to win, but the fans also get $1 million if they get a perfect bracket. So just some notable matchups to look over. We got Ryan Blaney and Carson Hocevar, Alex Bowman, Joey Logano. So 2 very, very good matchups, and ones that are going to be a bracket buster for some. And then we got Kyle Larson, Tyler Reddick, and then Chase Elliott, and Austin Dillon, who's a great super speedway driver. So I'd watch out for that one too. And just one more here. We got Christopher Bell and Ricky Stenhouse, who I think Ricky Stenhouse has finished inside like the top 10 in all of the next gen Atlanta races, if I'm not mistaken. And Christopher Bell, who just has had recently had success at Atlanta. So those are just some matchups I'd look out for and do a little bit more research on before you make your picks. But good luck to everyone who's filling out a bracket. So I'm super excited to see how this turns out.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be really exciting. I'm really glad that NASCAR implemented this whole thing this season. And, I saw the joke of the hype video for it on Instagram this morning. And Stenhouse mentions in the hype video, he goes, "Oh, so it's like the bracket Denny Hamlin thought of." And Blaney goes, "No, nothing like it." So I love that little point. I thought that was really funny. But you mentioned the first race for this is Atlanta. And I'll let you guys give your picks first on who you think's going to win Atlanta.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a homer, but I got to go with Ryan Blaney, a Penske guy. He almost had a win last year, and almost had 2 wins at their track last year. So I'm going to stick with it and go with him.
Yeah, I'm going with the Coke 600 winner. I got the shirt on right now, but I'm going with Ross Chastain. He had two back-to-back finishes and two spot finishes in Atlanta back in 2022. So I think he gets it done this weekend.
And I'm getting right back on the Penske train. I got the 2 of Austin Cindric. He can get it done at super speedways. He was close at Atlanta 1 earlier this year. Got it done at Talladega. So I think that car is going to be running up front all day. I think it's going to be fast. Penske, they always are. And I think that car is going to drive it right up to victory lane.
Great picks overall, and I can't wait to see how Atlanta turns out. But one last thing before we end the podcast, I want to plug our social medias again: Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all Upside Down Thoughts, and you guys can get to see some exclusive photos from the garage area at Pocono as they are posted on our Instagram. And then we also are on Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. I think that's everything. And there's a link tree on our Instagram bio where you guys can find us on every single platform that we're on. And also, if you guys want to see us fill out a podcast bracket where we all put 3 brains together, if Zach wants to join us and try to make the best bracket we possibly can, let us know. We'll do an extra little exclusive podcast for that. So leave a comment below. But that's all I have. So I want to thank you guys all for watching, and we will see you guys in the next one.
See you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.